Here is one tip for every Hearthstone class that will help you play against each class better. And some classes have 2 tips because I have favorites. The Demon Hunter class is really good at dealing direct damage through their hero attacking, but what they're not good at is dealing direct damage through their spells. That means if that Demon Hunter is getting a little too touchy with you, just put up some taunts as your defense mechanism. No one's allowed in your safety bubble. Usually having one taunt minion is enough to stop the Demon Hunters from dealing direct damage to your hero. Just keep in mind that they do have spells that can remove minions, which can be followed up by their hero attacking. But if you have 2 or more taunt minions on the board, or just big taunt minions in general, then there shouldn't be much Demon Hunters can do to deal direct damage to your hero. Once you have a taunt minion on the board, your hero will be safe from that Demon Hunter getting in your personal space. If you're a Demon Hunter and you can't understand social cues, then there is a few things you can do to get around taunts. Your best bet is to play a card like Illidari Inquisitor, which can help you effectively attack twice. You also have a few spells like I-Beam, which may help, but if your opponent has 2 taunts on the board, you're most likely not hitting their face at all. Unless you're playing Wild and you want to play Kane Sunfury for some reason, but other than that, taunt will stop you. Speaking of hitting face, since you're a Demon Hunter, you should know you're not going to be winning any long games. Your class is designed to be aggressive and annoying. If you have a lot of attack on your hero, sometimes the best option is to just hit the face rather than trading into a minion, especially against classes like Rogue and Hunter, which lack taunt and healing. Sometimes setting up for multi-turn lethal with your hero attack is the best play to do. But when to trade and when to go face? That question is best answered in a class coming up real soon. For Druids, if you've played any cards like Wild Growth that gives you mana crystals, you'll notice that whenever you play any of these cards at your maximum of 10 mana, you'll gain an excess mana card, which lets you draw a card for free. But if you played Nourish when you're at max mana and you chose the gain mana crystals option, you're an idiot, and you don't get an excess mana card. So why is that? The only thing Wild Growth can do is give you mana crystals, and when you're at 10 mana, you can't gain any more mana crystals. So the excess mana mechanic was made so you're not depressed over having these cards at 10 mana. Nice, that's one thing off the list that gets you depressed in Hearthstone. Cards like Nourish and Grove Tender have effects other than just gaining mana crystals. So when you choose to gain mana crystals instead of the other option, the game tells you how stupid you are by not giving you the excess mana card. This also counts for cards like Greedy Sprite. Since Greedy Sprite has stats along with its death rattle, the game says it's good enough to warrant not giving you excess mana cards from its death rattle. What most people don't realize about Hunters is that their hero power is really good. Just from their hero power alone, you can win a game in 15 turns. Considering that it's common for games to end on turn 7, that's kind of unimpressive, but the point is that it's a powerful hero power for dealing damage to your opponent's face. It's a free 2 damage every turn, and that damage can add up, especially if your opponent can't deal with it. With this in mind, when you're playing an aggressive Hunter deck, you should consider using your hero power in a lot more situations than you think. Maybe you predict that your opponent is going to play a board removal next turn, so instead of spending 2 mana on a minion and having it get ejected the next turn, save a life by shooting your opponent in the face. Or maybe by not playing that 2-drop, you might deter your opponent from playing a board clear at all, making your opponent play a weird turn. Another scenario could be when you have a 2 damage spell like Quick Shot in your hand. You could use that 2 mana to deal 3 damage to the face by using your Quick Shot, or you could use 2 mana to hero power and save 3 more damage for your next turn plus your 2 damage hero power again. Maybe your opponent is stupid and doesn't think you have lethal. Then you whip out the Quick Shot. No one expects the Quick Shot. Using this same mindset, sometimes it's better to hit face with your minions. Your hero power deals 2 damage, so going face a bit more than you would normally with another class like Priest could go a long way in securing some wins. This comes back to what I was saying with Demon Hunter, when to trade and when to go face. Well, when your opponent gets relatively low depending on the class, then you should consider going face. But what does relatively low even mean? For Priest, I'd say 15 health isn't too low, as they can just chug jug then heal. Same goes for Warrior, they can gain armor, so 15 health isn't too concerning for them. But for Rogues and Hunters, when they're at 15 health, they're on life support, so I would at least consider going face. This line of thinking only considers what is currently on the board though. Later on, I'm gonna go over when to go face when considering board clears in heavy control classes. Here's the problem with mages. They are so pathetically average at everything they do, they don't have strong enough strength or wretchedly woeful weaknesses. They can clear boards, but not as good as Warlocks. They have strong minions, but not as good as Paladins. They have really good general spells though. Whatever. So whenever you're playing Mage, you've got to keep in mind what you should be doing against certain classes to win games. Against Hunters, for example, you're probably trying to survive the early game, then swing the board in your favor. So you should use your cards accordingly. A card like Fireball is a great burst tool to blast some fools. but using that fireball on a minion against a hunter when you're low on health is probably better for you. And if you have board control against a hunter, maybe you hit face with the fireball. But against priest, just throwing that fireball in the face randomly without any afterthought is usually a waste because they can just Uno reverse card you, heal, boom. Using the tools of mage change in every matchup. And finding the right thing to do might seem simple at first, but it becomes more complex the more complicated the decks become. A general thing to remember is that you're not faster than the fast decks and you're not as control-y as the control-y decks. So try to outlast the aggro decks without exploding and try to smack the control decks before the endgame. Considering how just and fair paladins are, they really do like some forced labor. And by that, I mean that they rely on their minions to do all of their dirty work. Paladins don't have many spells which can directly influence their opponent's side of the board. Their card effects primarily focus on buffing their own minions. That's where the hero power is summon a slave. Since paladins rely heavily on having a board, once they've lost their board, it's usually really hard for them to get it back. That's why sometimes you should do some weird trades in the paladins because they could just buff the minion on the board and then steamroll you from there. It should also be said that paladins can refill their board pretty easily. Once you remove their board, the fight isn't over. They can easily play a few cards and the depression comes back. But since you already have board control because you can attack on your turn first, you should have the paladins on the ropes if you do have heavy board control. Just don't mess it up. Priest is a class of value, but that doesn't mean you can just use your value whenever you want. You don't draw cards as easily as other classes, and your spells are great, but often not the easiest to use in all scenarios. Sometimes saving your spells for more valuable targets is a better play in Priest. Or if you're low on cards, just hold onto a board removal and that might be the best option. The same idea goes for your hero power and healing effects too. I'll touch on this in Rogue and Warlock, but you should view your health as a resource. You're playing Priest, you can heal. So it makes sense for you to heal your minions on the board rather than just your face. Keeping board control by healing your minions is a lot better than healing your face for 2 damage.
Oh, but what if you're gonna lose if you don't heal yourself?
Well, what if your parents had loved you? You understood what I meant. You have value as Priest, but don't be afraid to inch out just a little bit more value by using your cards in a bit more greedy ways. The opposite problem happens for rogues as they just don't have any healing at all. Any damage you're going to deal to that rogue will be permanent. Unless you do rogue things and that's stupid, but other than that, do not be afraid to pressure the face. But as a rogue, that doesn't mean you shouldn't attack minions with your hero. Think of it this way. If there is a 2/1 minion on your opponent's side on the board and you attack into that minion, that is 2 damage to your face. Yay. But if you don't attack into it, it still deals 2 damage next turn. Just tank the 2 damage, it's a lot better for you in the long run. But be careful not to do it too much against classes like Hunter, which can easily whittle you down. Try to use your spells or minions for those trades. You might think with all the powerful spells Shaman has that they can last the long game and win control matchups. But they can't. You idiot. Shamans are pretty good at dealing quick damage and they can do it consistently over the game, but once they run out hard. So don't be trying to outvalue any priest or warlocks today. And that's honestly all I had for shamans. Sucks to suck. Please, this next warlock tip is so easy to do. Just tap first. If you're looking at your plan for your turn and you notice that you'll probably have 2 extra mana at the end of your turn to use your hero power, then use that 2 mana before you play the rest of your cards. This also goes for any card that can draw you anything or generates you cards. Now that's not the hard part. The hard part is remembering to do it. A lot of the time you have the perfect play in mind. This Hearthstone play will revolutionize the game. It'll get that cute cashier at the local grocery store to finally notice you. Your parents might finally be proud of you, but don't get too carried away. You play your cards in a way that no one has ever clicked their mouse before, but at the end of your turn, you realize that you have 2 mana left over. So you decide to tap just for the fun of it. Then, you realize as you look into the card that that one card you drew at the end of your turn would have been a better play. Nay, it would have won you the game. If you could only get rid of that one card, it would finally be fulfilled in life. If only. You could get rid of your V card, buckaroo. Speaking of life taps, don't be afraid to tap more often. 2 health isn't that big of a deal when you consider that you're drawing a card. Think of your health as a resource. I spend 2 health to draw a card. To that extent, you can take 5 damage on one turn to get more value out of a removal the other turn. That's capitalism, baby. For warriors, you want to be mindful about how you use your removal. Warriors can't generate a lot of cards, so you're stuck with what you've got. Like I've been saying throughout the video, knowing when to best use your removal is tricky and the matchup dependent. But here are a few warrior tricks that can help you learn how to best use use your removal. Don't armor up, then attack with your weapon so that the armor gets removed and your health stays the same. Lose health first, then armor up. Warrior has a lot of cards that can reward you when you have armor instead of health, so use that to your advantage. You can also potentially heal your health back up beneath your armor, but that's not really a warrior thing to do. I will say that there is one card in the game that can punish you for this, and that's Plate Breaker. And that's in Wild, and Blizzard doesn't really care about that game mode, so neither will I. In terms of actually removing minions, there is a very specific method I go through when I consider removing a minion, which is guaranteed to help you get better at trading your minions and removing with your spells. And I go over that in this video right here. Subscribe for more Hearthstone. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you around.